All right. So I just wanted to share some information that, as beginning ceramic artists, we might not know, and it will make a big difference when you're working with clay. So the first thing is I want to talk about a little bit of clay shrinkage rate. Clay shrinkage. And what that means, you have a nice, moist, wet clay that you're working with, and the more it's exposed to air, it's gonna dry out. And what's happening is, let's say I'm kind of drawing this whistle here. There's my whistle, there's my reed cut out. Boom, I have a whistle. As it dries, the moisture that's in the clay, the water, is moving out towards the surface and evaporating. Pretty much it's evaporating and it starts drying out. What happens to your clay as it does that? First of all, every clay is gonna have a shrinkage rate because it's made of like little particles, like platelets that are kind of randomly throughout your clay body. And as the water evaporates, and someone said that you can actually look at these platelets under a microscope, that they're about the size of a red blood cell. But what happens as, your clay body starts shrinking, if this is the outside wall, this is the inside wall, the water is going out. It's leaving. Boom. And what's happening to these platelets, they're actually gonna move closer together. So that's gonna make your clay shrink. The clay that we're working with is a clay called Cinco Blanco. And their shrinkage rate, if you look on the Armadillo Clay website, I want to say they have it listed at 13%. But when I talk to the guys, they say it's about 12 to 13% shrinkage rate. So if you were to make, like, for example, a cup, or something like this, a little vase, and let's say that you made this thing, it was 10 inches tall. By the time it shrinks, it's going to shrink down to about 9, because it's going to actually go down a little bit. So why is this important? It's important because when you're adding things, like your whistle today, hopefully you're at the point where we left off last class, to where you have like the main body of your whistle, you have the mouthpiece, and now it's all about adding pieces on, decorating, carving things out. Now, this is important because you want to make sure that you add the parts to this at almost about, you're trying to match the moisture level on the clay. If for some reason you start working on your whistle today, and let's say you left it out, it starts drying, and then you go get a brand new piece out of your bag that's like the original like plastic state, and you add it on. Oh, I want to add, I'm making a little pig, so I'm adding a snout. You add this snout to your whistle. If this clay is wetter than the whistle, then this has already started shrinking some percentage of this 12 to 13%, and this one has not started shrinking yet. So what could happen right here, where you join them, you might get a crack. And for the most part, if they're close in moisture level, you can always come back after it starts drying, and with the tool rub that crack and close it back up. But if these two are like way different as far as moisture level goes, then that crack is not going to go away, and when you fire your stuff, it's going to reveal that crack. I'm not saying that the piece might fall off, but you will have a crack like going around that. You will be visible and cause like cosmetic, unsightly things on your work. So like if you're looking at something like this, you can kind of see where the base of the whistle was, which is this round part. Here's the mouthpiece. So they added all this stuff. They added this trunk, they added this tusk, they added the ears, they added the little legs. Everything on here was added, right? The little eyes, the tail. So I just want to remind you, make sure that the moisture level on your whatever you're adding and the parts you are adding are about the same, because if one is too dry than the other, it's not gonna go on completely seamless. You'll start having cracks in between where you added them, the ear, the leg. So, and just make sure you work it. The other thing, you know, some of these tools that we put in here are good for compressing, but especially I would say the popsicle stick. You know, when you have one part that you're adding to another, you know, it's always good to compress and try to blend those together. Boom, one to another. Because what happens, you know, if you have two pieces of clay, you can kind of see the platelets here. And then let's say you're gonna add another piece right here. And if there's platelets here, you can kind of get some of those platelets to cross back and forth. And, you know, some of them might be left in between and they'll weld much better. Also remember, I don't know if you guys have started doing this already, but those little chunks of clay that I've been having left over, I've been putting in this bag. And I just put the water in this morning and it's already kind of turning mushy. This stuff is the best glue that you can use for attaching things. And you can either take like this popsicle stick and take a little bit of this stuff. And then whenever you're adding one part to another, use some of this and put it on. And it's a great way to make things attach have a strong bond. All right, so let me take my clay out and I'll try to show you some of these things more with the clay in front of me. Hopefully you'll understand it better, and then I'm gonna let y'all get to work. Let me get my things out. Oh. Now, while I get this stuff out, also to remind you, so like I said, I'm giving you today's class and next class on Tuesday to work on these, to work on carving your stamps and work on, you know, finishing the design of your whistle. Just a reminder, it is a weekend, which means your clay is going to be sitting there for a good while. So make sure that whenever you cover this, you make a really tight seal so no air can get to it. Also, if it's like a weekend or gonna be, you know, more than a couple of days, here in class we have like spray bottles. I usually squirt my clay with a couple of sprays. If you don't have a spray bottle at home, you can kind of just, you know, take your cup of water, whatever you're using for your water container, and just kind of dip your fingers in it and just, you know, spray it that way, especially since it's going to be a weekend. And I would get it nice and moist in there. Now, the only issue with that, I will tell you, that way if this happens to you, you won't think it's weird. But if you do put water on this, sometimes if it sits there long enough, you'll start like developing mold on like especially the canvas. The canvas is really bad at creating mold, but you can just wipe it down and it should be okay. All right, so I kind of was messing with this whistle. I put water on it and now I want to get rid of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to verify that I still have the sound. I'm hoping that you guys were able to get a sound from this. And like I said, once you have the sound, if you lock this thing in place and don't mess with the reed and the mouthpiece, it should stay. Even though this clay, like I said, is going to shrink at about 12%, 13%, it's not going to affect the sound. If you have the sound, it's going to stay. Unless something happens to where the mouthpiece, boom, gets bent or moved way out of place, you should be okay. These are my stamps. And last class, I actually left one of my stamps out so it can firm up, and I was able to carve it. And I am like super proud of this one because it's like the sharpest one I think I've ever, well, not ever done, but it's pretty sharp. It's my initials. Oh, you can't see it. Looks something like that. In a minute, I'll stamp it so you can see it. Like I said, I did quite a few. I did my candle business logo. I did my initials kind of in cursive. I don't know how that's going to look. And then I did a little flower. And then this one, the last one I did was my initials kind of intertwined, like RM, intertwined into one piece. So then these have already been fired. We did my advanced students brought in some projects they had done, and we fired off a kiln already. It was a little kiln, but we fired one off. So whistle. Next thing I'm looking for is my clay. So like I said, just remember that whenever you're working this clay, get out what you think you're gonna use. Don't get more than that, because air is the enemy of this. Now I can tell you just by getting this clay out that this stuff is way wetter than this. This has been sitting, it's a little bit more dry. So one thing you can do, you can like think about when you're designing your whistle, think about the parts you need. Okay, so like for example, this elephant, what parts does it need? Well, if this is a whistle, I need to make a trunk. I need to make 2 little tusks. I need to make 2 ears. You know, it kind of looks like they did like 2 little round pea things for the eyes. So 2 of those, and then it has 4 legs. So think about it kind of in parts. And then what I would do, I would highly suggest for you to do this, is take your bag, put your whistle in the bag, and cover it up. Now, for me, and I'm pretty sure your guys' whistle is probably the same thing, I would say there's quite a bit of a difference between the moisture level of the whistle and the moisture level of this. This whistle's already kind of firming up. I would say it's at the beginning stages of the leather hard stage. And so I don't want this to dry out more, because if it gets too dry, it's not good for attaching things if it gets too dry. So I'm actually gonna wet this a little bit. I'm just kind of throwing water in there with my hand. I am going to carefully, so I don't mess up the mouthpiece, wrap this up. I'm not gonna tie it off, I'm just gonna kind of wrap it up and set it aside. So I'm gonna set it like this, aside. And then what I'll do is, I'm gonna worry about making my parts now. So, you know what am I gonna make? I wanna make a little pig. So I'm gonna start with making the parts for my pig. I need 1 snout, I need 2 eyes, I need 4 legs, and I need a curly tail. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to make the snout kind of big. Oh, and the ears, did I say ears? I don't know. But anyway, that's what I need. Snout, eyes, ears, legs, and tail. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make my parts. I'm gonna use this as my snout. Oh, here they are. I lost my tools. I'm gonna kind of use my gift card to help smooth things out. I might need this fork. And in a minute, I might need a paper clip to score and slit my clay. So for this, I'm kind of just using it to help me shape things. So I'm gonna call this my snout. I'll set that aside. Next thing I need, I'm kind of gonna make the eyes like, kind of like the elephant. It's just like 2 little balls of clay, about the same size. And then all I'm gonna do whenever I attach this to my whistle, I'm just gonna push, you know, score the back side of this and just push it down so it creates this flat looking disc, and that'll be my eye. And then I'm gonna carve out the inside of it to show where the iris, the pupil. I'm not a big knowledge on eye anatomy, but I'll carve in with my paper clip or a wood the I'm gonna call it the iris. I might be wrong. of the eye. Okay, so that's kind of what you want to do. That's what I would recommend you doing. Think about what parts do I need and start making those. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make all your parts. You're going to let them sit to where the moisture level kind of matches your whistle. And once, oh, look, I made my parts after 30 minutes. Oh, they got dry enough. Then you can get your whistle back out very carefully. Wonder what that, did y'all hear that noise? I heard it, that's the second day we hear it and we don't know what the heck that means. All right, so I'm just gonna show you this, that way you can get to work. But, you know, for me, I would have probably let these sit longer till it matches the dryness level of this whistle. But I just want to remind you, and I think I'm going to, how am I gonna do this? Trying to see how I can hide this mouthpiece within this pig. That's probably one of the hardest things to do, is how are you going to incorporate this section into your design? Because it's like you can't move this once it's done. You know, you have the sound, you really don't want to move any of this. But I think I might just do it upside down and then put the legs, but that will look weird. Anyway, I'm just going to show you how to attach this stuff. That way you can start working. But the main thing is, I want to remind you, is wherever you're attaching something, like let's say I'm going to attach this right there. You want to make sure that that area where you're attaching your scoring, which means, you know, making those little scratches back and forth. You want to make sure that you're scoring the attachment. In this case, this little round piece of clay. And then I'm going to try to take some of this slip that's in the bag. Like I said, I just added this water today, but the longer it sits, the more it's going to become one solid mushy paste. And I'm just taking a little bit of that slip, which is watered down clay. I'm adding it on there. Then I'm going to kind of add this on and kind of work it back and forth. I'm kind of pushing and shaking at the same time, pushing and shaking, so that those scratches kind of start lining up together, and boom, they kind of lock in place. So I'm pushing down and moving around. And like I said, if I was going to make this my eyeball, then I'm going to push it down with my thumb or finger and make it look like a little plate, like a little disc. And then my other eye, I would probably put it right here, and so on and so forth. Now, I do want to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to take my stick that has that sharp point on it. And what I'm doing, I'm just kind of going around this edge where it meets. And you can either try to blend them together by pushing down and like bringing it out. That's one thing you can do, just like that. Another thing you can do is, if you want, because some people like that line that's in between, you can also just clean it up with this stick. Make sure any of that slip that's sticking out, you clean out. And you can leave that shape in between and not necessarily blend it like this. Because that slip, and once with the pressure that you added, it'll keep it in place. So those are probably the two main options that people use to clean up their work. Is they either weld it together by pushing down and, you know, bringing it towards the main body, so it kind of blends into one piece, or clean out the space between both the whistle and the attachment to create a nice clean line. So like I said, the main thing is make your parts and wait until they're about the same moisture level. And these small parts, like if you have small attachments, the smaller it is, the faster it's going to dry. The bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. So just keep that in mind. Check your stuff. And, you know, as you're working, oh, this one's like this one's already like way drier than this snout shape. And it's crazy because I just made them. And, you know, what happens is the air's hitting it more. The canvas is absorbing some of the moisture and so on and so forth. So just because of their size, this one is drying out faster. The main thing you want to keep in mind is try to match the moisture on your parts and on your whistle so that you don't have any bad cracks or any bad things happen when you're working on this. Okay, so that's that. Does anyone have any questions on attaching? Okay, so another popular thing that people like to do is they like to carve things out from their whistles, or they like to add something and then carve a section out of it. So I just want to show you that, you know, once that your clay is kind of firm, one of the things that's popular for carving out is actually like the loop of this paper clip. You can take the loop of this paper clip, like dig it in, and, you know, you can carve out some decent lines, some decent shapes. Now, the other thing you can do is you can try to alter the shape. You know, right there, I kind of dug in those little divots. They're pretty clean. When you want to carve, just make sure that your clay is at the leather hard stage, which is it's nice and firm, it's holding its shape, and it's not mushy. That's the best time to carve. The other thing you can do is you can try to alter the shape of the paper clip. So I could try to make this more into a like point, like make it a little bit more pointier like that, and that'll give me a sharper line. So I can try to dig this, and then the difference between the regular loop on the paper clip and this one that I try to make smaller is the size of the mark that it gives you. So those are some things, paper clips, that's why I put them in your kit. They're great for carving stuff out. And the last thing you can use a point of the paper clip, the point itself. So like, for example, I said, if this was gonna be considered one of my eyes, once it gets to the leather hard stage, I can take this point. Right now, this clay is like really soft still, but if it's to the leather hard stage, I can take this and, you know, try to carve out the pupil. And make an eye. And once I have that done, once it dries a little bit, I can take my sponge, try to clean it up, recarve if I need to recarve, and a little at a time work that until I get the results I want. And then last but not least, if you didn't get to your stamps, like I said, these stamps work best when these are pretty stiff. You don't want to carve these when they're like really soft because it'll just make a big mess. You won't get nice clean lines. And like I said, this one, since last time we met, I had left out this chunk of clay and I carved this like the last 15 minutes of the day. So about 3:45 to 4 o'clock is when I carved this. So it just sat out for about an hour and a half until it got nice and firm. And then I was able to carve it out really nice. And, you know, I actually used a felting knife, which is like a regular knife, small knife, paring knife. And it worked great. And, you know, I haven't even tried this out. I just got these out of the kiln. But just because of how it looks, I know it's going to give me a really good stamp. And, I mean, that is like really clean. And those are my initials, right? RM, kind of intertwined. So those are the things we need to work on. And like I said, the time that you have for this is going to be today and next class period. So for the next 2 class periods, you know, that's the time you have to work on these. Just remember, let me go see if I can remember all the vital information for this. Just remember, whenever you're done for today, you're like, you know what, this is going to be my stopping point. Put up all your stuff, close it up really good, put it in a plastic bag and tie it off. I would even highly recommend to take some water and spritz it on there so you can add more moisture to the clay, because it's going to be sitting throughout the weekend until next Tuesday if you're working in class. So I would even spritz it with some water, tie it off really good. What else is vital information? Whistle. I mean, the only other thing is, if you did get a sound, great. Once you get the sound, try not to mess with this. You know, I'm thinking right now, man, I should have made this mouthpiece a little bit shorter. Man, it would have been easier to hide. But I'm not even going to risk it, because, I mean, just changing the size of that might, more than likely it will not, but it might affect getting that sound, because the main thing is getting air through here straight into the reed. So if I cut this shorter, it's probably not going to affect it. But if there's any movement of the mouthpiece, it is. So once you get your sound, lock it into place and try your hardest not to move this. And if you do have any clay at the end of the day that you took out of the bag and it's too dry, then you can go ahead and throw it into your little recycling bag with the water and let it sit, and eventually that'll turn into some nice slip. And so whistles, stamps, man, I can't think of anything else. Let me check the schedule. Yeah, so our lunch bell rings at 1:20, which is a little bit less than 30 minutes from now. And then we come back until 2:25. So like I said, listen, these classes, you know, if you're in one of my art classes, they're designed for you to do your work during this class time. So, you know, it's not necessary for you to keep working or, you know, work over the weekend or say, oh, I got to finish this. You know, just keep working on your stuff, and I'll try to give you enough time to finish them up. Oh, yeah, now I remember. I have something else to share with you. Hey, that turned out pretty good. Look, that's my initials.
It's working.
It's working? Well, good. Because that's the main thing we want. We want it to work. Okay, I remember what I was going to say. It's because I don't write this stuff down and I forget. Listen. So if you're in my sculpture class or in my other, in some of my other classes, you know that one of the ways that we turn things in is by taking progress pictures of your work. So I wanted to tell you that for today, once you're done working, you need to take a picture of whatever you have done, because we're going to start turning those things in. And let me show you really quick what it looks like. Next time that we meet, since we're all going to start working, we have our clay, we're going to start working on these projects. You're going to turn those things in through a Google slide. And depending on what you did that week, I'll look at your pictures. You're going to have a slide that has your progress pictures. And then you're going to have some text that you write, a sentence or two, describing what you did. For example, this is the ones that I kind of did for sculpture class. Present. So there's my first slide. That's kind of what I started doing at the beginning of the year. This is the first week of school. This was my planning page on the left, how I started and how I progressed. And right there on the right side, it has an example, or an example. It has a couple of sentences that describe what I did. So for today, when you stop working, you need to take a progress picture of your work. And then next class that we meet, I'll go over this again and tell you what you need to turn in for that week coming up. See, so this is the next week, see, August 24th to 28th. I kept taking pictures of my work as I went. We took some notes that week in sculpture class, and then I wrote there at the bottom what I did, and so on and so forth. So this was the next week. You know, I was still working on that, but said what I did, blah, 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 blah. So what you need to do for today is, for the rest of our class time, work on your whistle, work on your stamps, if you did not start your stamps last class, it might be a good idea to do them today, because you can let them sitting out, let them firm up, and then start carving them. These shouldn't take that long. These, depending on how intricate your design is, might take anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes to do. And if you had 2 designs, let's say they take about 20 minutes. If you had 2 designs, 2 stamps, then it's probably going to take you like 40 minutes to do this. So a smart thing to do is start making your parts for your whistle. Once your parts are done for your whistle, set them aside so they start drying, and then you can start carving your stamps. And then just check these. Okay, it still needs more time. You can keep working on this. And then you check it again, 20 minutes later. Oh, look, it matches the moisture level of my whistle. Then you could put this aside and start attaching the stuff to your whistle, whatever the case may be, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're kind of gonna go back and forth between working your whistles and working your stamps, okay? The main thing is to remember, keep this covered, the whistle covered, while you make the parts that you're going to attach to this. That way it doesn't keep, you wanna stop the drying process on this, and you wanna make your parts so it dries to match this. I'm trying to explain this as best I can, and I know this might be a little confusing. Does anyone have any questions before we go? Oh look, I wanted to try my flower stamp. Oh yeah, it came out all right. All right, so the last thing today, I'm hoping to get a response, because I sent an email to our APs about you guys coming up here and being able to drop things off to get fired. So as soon as I get a response, hopefully I'll have a response by next week. I will let you know how that's going to work. And that way you can bring stuff, get it fired, because once it's fired, it's permanent. Like these have been fired. I mean, I could, they're good to go. They're not going to move. The only thing that might happen is if I drop them, it's kind of like glass. If I drop them hard enough from the right point, they might break. But these are in a state where they're not going to distort or move anymore. So, yeah, I think that's all I have. So for the rest of class, it's your work time. I am going to stay on the Zoom meeting, but I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I am going to work on my stuff. And if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, or if you leave the meeting, come back to the meeting if a question comes up. I will shut off the Zoom meeting during lunch, so at 1:20, I'm leaving, but I will be back at 1:50 until 1:20 or 2:25. So you guys go work, have fun. Remember, clay, be nice to it. Just work it a little at a time. Don't rush it. This is one of those things you can't rush. And yeah, I think that's it.